Call the meeting to order. We have a full meeting today. Not only do we have the current presentation we have listed, but we also have Q&A for the presenters yesterday who agreed graciously to stick around today to answer questions. So with that, we'll jump right in it. First presentation is from the Bureau of Environmental Field Services, and we have Eric Glave, Director of the District Offices. Eric, if you would, please.
Thank you, Chairman Connolly, and thank you, committee. My name is Eric Glave. I'm with the Bureau of Environmental Field Services, and we have three sections in our Bureau. Next slide, please. District Office Operations, which encompasses by far the most staff that we have. Each of the offices is staffed with personnel who are trained in specific programs.
One moment, please. We don't have the sharing going on yet on the screen.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
Damien, do I need to share?
He's going to do it. He's just getting there. Okay, we're ready now. Please go ahead.
Okay, could we advance to the next slide, Damien? And as I said, we're in 6 district offices and 1 satellite office across the state, and each of the offices is staffed with personnel who are trained in specific program areas. Next slide, please. The district offices provide a great deal of technical assistance to the public and to the regulated community. We provide that in person and on the phone or through email. This year has been a challenge providing technical assistance in person, but we have been able to do a lot of work via email and via the phone. A lot of times this might be something like helping a water supply system find a new place to sample because someone isn't there sick, or helping someone with some of our electronic reporting systems, that type of assistance. Also, as you see in this picture, helping someone dispose of some waste tires that she inherited. Next slide, please. Our district staff are also our frontline disaster response staff. We work with the bureaus here in Topeka very closely to provide technical assistance during disaster recovery. We do debris management. One of our disasters that we assisted with last year, the Iola warehouse fire, NAG warehouse in Iola, caught fire on January 1st. It was extinguished, no loss of life, no injuries that I know of. However, firefighting and extinguishing water did become contaminated with several ag chemicals and entered a stream near the Neosho River, then entered the Neosho River, which is a source of public water supply for several communities downstream. So we worked with Kansas, with our Kansas Health and Environment Labs, with the Bureau of Water, to really get out, sample. We worked with the Bureau of Environmental Remediation to get out, sample, and protect the public on that. So a several-week event, worked Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, you name it, we were there. Next slide, please. District office operations, we also do complaint investigation. We take every complaint very seriously and we get out and investigate. We work hand in hand with Parks and Wildlife on fish kill investigations. We also do harmful algal bloom sampling, which are considered complaints. And we do ad hoc water sampling and respond to quite a few complaints through the year. Next slide, please. The majority of our work, most of our staff are generally called inspectors, have other official titles, but they are inspectors, and we perform inspections to fulfill the requirements that we have to EPA and to our state programs to ensure that all the permitted facilities we have are in compliance with their permits. So we'll be out at a livestock waste operation or We have hazardous waste, public water supply. We get out, we do a lot of inspections. Lion's share of our work last year was a little difficult with restrictions on how close we could be with folks, but we were able to complete a good number of our targets. Next slide, please. This is probably the one thing that tells the most about the district operations. We work with every program, and as you can see from the pie chart, we receive funding from every program. This pays for our staffing. And large part of that is state general fund, about $1.6 million. That state general fund contribution actually makes the match for the other programs to apply to their federal grants. So, so if it's a 40% EPA match or a match for EPA or 20%, that's where it's generally applied is funding our inspection staff. Next slide, please. The livestock waste management section is, does the permitting for livestock waste facilities across the state. As you can see, we have about 1,500 facilities total, 434 federally sized facilities, very large facilities, mostly located west of US 283. And these facilities all have unique permits. They're all reviewed by engineering staff and geology staff here in the Topeka office. And we try and work really hard to make sure that these operations are in compliance with Clean Water Act and in compliance with state statutes. This section also works really well with our other section, the watershed management section. If we have facilities that are not facilities, we have operations that are not what we would consider pollution potentials, we try and work with our watershed management group to really get out and find solutions for smaller operators to not be facilities, because we don't get paid on a per facility basis. We're trying to prevent water pollution. Another good part about this is working directly with our district staff. We have a lot of local knowledge out there. And each of those animals that you see on that map are one facility. And as you can see a large number of facilities in the central part of the state where we have a lot of small feeding operations, and fewer numbers out towards the west where they're larger, actually more head of cattle and hogs than in the rest of the state. Next slide, please. The watershed management section. Now this section has a lot of programs. They deal with, I'm not going to read them all. They are the non-point source. So group, my other groups are more permanent oriented. This group is more non-permanent oriented. So this group really gets out and works with agriculture producers throughout the state to really control the amount of pollution that's getting into the streams. And they also work with local governments, local groups, and mostly, and they have a large program called the RAPS program, which does a lot of work. It's a very specific community-based system that builds a lot of stakeholder involvement and really involves persons in that watershed to work towards a solution. Next slide, please. So our funding for the watershed management section, we're able to leverage about $6 of federal funding for every $1 of state funding that we have. You can see we take in state funding for RAPS, for drinking water protection, and for non-point source staff, which we leverage into money that we can bring back from federal dollars to really apply to helping Kansas keep clean water. So very important. The drinking water protection program is also one of our newest programs, and it's very similar to our RAPS program in that we try and build local stakeholder involvement to implement best management practices around groundwater sources in the state to try and eliminate nitrate pollution. Next slide, please. So a little deeper into our watershed restoration protection strategy. This small offset watershed here is the Milford watershed, or Milford RAPS group. What we're able to do with this local involvement, we have a trained professional who heads up this group, and that person is able to apply a 9-element scientifically based plan to look at the watershed, determine key areas. Those areas in red, they're really sub-watershed level that could use some greater assistance and management practices. Those areas may have greater slope or different types of soil or just different land use. Our group tries to work with that RAPS group, those stakeholders, those folks who are actually out there, the farmers and the landowners who are out there to see if we can implement practices that they may not have thought of or may not have thought were viable. Next slide, please. Drinking water protection program, very similar. We formed that in the shape of RAPS. We meet with local stakeholders. I was with a group when we met with the city of Ford and a group of their stakeholders, farmers around the area, feedlot operators, the local grain elevator operator, all those folks. We got together and formed a team out there, and locally based, locally directed. We're providing assessments to try and figure out what exactly is going into the groundwater, where it's coming from. We do look at whether or not it's commercial fertilizer or manure. We can really concentrate our efforts around those wells and around those to make an impact on that groundwater source. We currently have about 9 cities in our program. We have one more that we're signing in, and we're offering assessment of what's going on. We'll look at the well construction, we'll look at land use around there, and we'll really try to work to an agreeable solution to try and limit the amount of nitrates that are going in. All these cities are approaching or just above the nitrate level permitted by EPA and by the state in drinking water, public water supply drinking water. And so what we want to do is try and not have them have to install a $2.3 million ion exchange plant that may last for 20 years and requires a great deal of maintenance and a great deal of expertise to run. So we're out working with these small cities like the city of Ford, city of Isabel, city of Paxico, these small towns where we can get in and really help, because the city of Ford, if they had to install a $1.2 or $2.3 million ion exchange plant, besides the fact that it costs a lot of money up front, it would also take continual maintenance and require a very well-trained and highly technical operator to continue to keep that functioning. So if we can not have them get there by changing land use patterns or changing just specifics in the way a well is constructed, we can really offset that cost. Next slide, please. Local environmental protection program was funded for quite a few years by the state. It is now not funded. We work with local environmental protection groups or county sanitarians across the state to assist with on-site wastewater systems, which would be septic tanks or small wastewater lagoons, depending on where you're at. We really we provide technical assistance, review of the county sanitary code, and we try and get out and find new ways to help people out on these septic systems and on these small wastewater system, private wastewater systems, and which makes a big they can be a big factor in water pollution, especially around rivers and lakes. So these are this is one of our key components. Next slide, please. Um, we do a lot of information education outreach. We recently were awarded $750,000 from the EPA. This is a key component of this group's plan. We do a lot of community work. We put on a lot of miles. We crisscross the state. We are talking to folks in agriculture, talking to folks in cities about how to reduce non-point source pollution all the time. Next slide, please. We also work through the Bureau of Water. We also work with Clean Water State Revolving Loan Funds, and we work with interagency stream bank teams. So we have quite a few players in the game for watershed, for sediment reduction, pollution reduction, and surface water, and we all work together to kind of come to the same goal. But we all have a little bit different game plan. So the interagency stream bank team is just a prime example of how three agencies get together and work and apply their different types of strategy to the same goal. Next slide, please. And then green infrastructure. This has become an area that is very exciting and moving on in a very rapid fashion. The Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, which is a really big word or set of words to say, is this group of big companies that, like General Mills and Nestle, these really big international companies who are trying to reduce their footprint, their pollution footprint in the world and in the U.S. and they're giving us a lot of assistance in technical training and giving us funding so we can do technical training for farmers and make that where it's water pollution reduction is actually an added value and an extra added value to these farmers. So it becomes one more thing that adds to the value of their bottom line at the end of the day. And what we see here is a Higgy interseeder. It actually plants rye and radishes in between corn and soybeans prior to harvest, so that the rye and radishes have a chance to start growing before harvest. And then once harvest comes on, they really have a chance to take off and be the cover crops for during the winter season or during the off season. Next slide, please. And as I said, we have a number of programs out there. We assist local homeowners with, trying to make sure that around an HOA or around a small water body to make sure that their plans to reduce water pollution are up to snuff. And then we also have the LCLP, which is a new program. Also, hasn't gotten a lot of participation yet because general interest rates have been really low, so it's kind of a tough sell right at the moment. But it gets out and really it provides some funding out there for folks who need to do some environmental improvement in a low cost, low interest way. And then our Clean Water Act Section 401, so the Clean Water Act Section 401, we certify that projects that are going on in waters of the U.S. Do comply with different water quality conditions that we have, and work very heavily with the Corps of Engineers to make sure that these things are meeting everyone's safety and not being a hindrance to our local producers. And next slide, please. That's the end of my presentation. I think I'll stand for questions later and let Tom get started on his, if that's okay.
Very much okay. We're glad that you mentioned it. Mr. Stiles, if you would, please.
Thank you, Chairman Highland. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. So today, let me run through the other federal act that the Bureau of Water administers here in the state. This is the Safe Drinking Water Act. It came into being. Next slide, please. 2 years after the Clean Water Act in 1974. It's a very, very detailed act along with the associated federal regulations, very detailed and prescriptive, and accordingly, again, Kansas has primacy on this. We've assumed that since, or fully assumed it, I think, since March of 2019. But we have the associated state statutes and regulations that allow us to perform and administer the act on behalf of the federal government here in the state. Next slide. Quick history, again, late 1974, Congress passed it. The initial emphasis was just on treatment technique, predominantly disinfection. The act has been amended twice, in 1986 and 1996. Each time, the scope of the act has been expanded greatly into other areas regarding the safety of drinking water provided through public water supply systems. In 1996, it also established a funding mechanism for drinking water infrastructure, as well as requirements for certified operators to run water treatment plants, and looking at the overall ability of the system to sustain itself on both a technical, financial, and management basis. The Safe Drinking Water Act is it's much more extensive than the Clean Water Act because there is uniformity all across the country in administering the Safe Drinking Water Act, whereas the Clean Water Act can be customized to reflect the hydrology and geology and geography and associated demographics in each state to reflect how clean water is defined. Drinking water is uniformly viewed. It doesn't matter if it's a town of 100 or a city of 100,000, they both have to meet the same standards. And it doesn't matter if that city is in Kansas or Iowa or New York or Oregon. Everyone in a public water supply system has to adhere to the same rules. And so it is a much more blanket type of regulation. And again, by that nature, the regulations themselves are very, very detailed in laying out the expectations, recognizing that systems vary among the towns and the size of the town certainly vary as well. But it is very, I'd almost say, prescriptive in the expectations on all our public water supplies as to how they conform to the law. Next slide, please. So from our perspective, these are the general areas that the law requires us to oversee, essentially construction and upgrading of treatment facilities, distribution systems, and storage and application of chemicals used to convert raw water into finished water for the consumption by our public. Siting requirements, operation and maintenance requirements. Of course, disinfection is the rule across the board. And then primary drinking water regulations with maximum MCLs or maximum contaminant levels. A lot of monitoring, a lot of analytical requirements and reporting. Lead, as we've seen. Siting requirements. Do I have feedback? Continue.
It's on our end.
Okay, I'll continue then. Lead, of course, is a hot button issue in the aftermath of Flint, Michigan, and then subsequently Newark, New Jersey. But it is probably one of the front burner issues of the administration, both in the previous administration and now the current Biden administration. Lead, revised lead and copper rule will be first and foremost among the actions taken under the Safe Drinking Water Act in the coming year. Filtration, disinfection, treatment expectations, as well as public notification and informing the public as to how confident they can be that the water that they're consuming is meeting the safe drinking water standards. Next slide, please. Functionally, within the Bureau of Water, our public water supply section has 4 units, plus it oversees the water system operator certification program. But we have engineering and permitting that review plans and specs for the construction or updating of of treatment facilities. Compliance and data, managing all the data that are coming in from the public water supplies for a variety of contaminants on a variety of schedules, and issuing, making sure the public water supplies issue those consumer confidence reports, as well as compiling them for EPA an annual compliance report each year as to how well our community water supply systems have done. Capacity development and enforcement touches upon that technical, financial, and management capability, and to help to ensure that the systems that are in place continue to employ good business practices and stay solvent. But this is also our enforcement arm that generates administrative consent orders, boil water advisories are generated out of this unit, as well as new efforts to try to work with systems to optimize their treatment processes to continue to improve their position in being able to comply with the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And then finally, our SRF program for drinking water is also embedded within the public water supply section, and that again allows for the financing of infrastructure, as well as provision of planning grants for small communities and other types of investigations. Next slide. This is probably the key slide as to what defines a public water supply system. Here in Kansas, a public water supply system has to be a source of supply that is tied into 10 service connections or more, or regularly serves at least 25 individuals at least 60 days out of the year. And somewhat connected to that is just this definition of potable water, which involves more than drinking. It also involves cooking and washing, as dictated by the federal act as well. That sweeps up a lot of facilities that go beyond just what you would expect in terms of municipalities or rural water districts. I'll show you here on the next slide, please. They come in three forms of our public water supply systems: community water systems, which you wouldn't recognize as cities or rural water districts, but mobile home parks as well; transient non-community systems, motels, campgrounds, truck stops, convenience stores located on the highway; and then non-transient, non-community systems, which would be our schools and our daycares and self-supplied industries, all fitting again under those criteria of 25 people or more being served by them at least 60 days out of the year. We have about almost 980 of these systems, of which about 89% are the community water systems that we routinely deal with. But it is a very, very wide net that the definition under the law casts in terms of the provision of water supply to our citizens. Next slide. The Act is just embedded with a number of rules regarding the treatment and expectation of contaminants placed within our water supplies. Generally, there are about 10 rules governing contaminants, depending on whether it's surface water, groundwater, presence of inorganics, presence of microorganisms, etc., and expectations in terms of both MCLs, maximum contaminant levels, as well as treatment techniques that are applied to them to essentially safeguard the safety of that delivered water supply. Generally, about 90% of our public water supply systems are typically compliant each year with the variety of the rules. It is a very data-driven compliance system. The systems routinely sample and send into our KDHE's lab analysis for the variety of contaminants there, and those are the basis for taking any subsequent action regarding enforcement or working toward keeping them on the compliance side of the Act. Some violations, of course, are true violations of the MCLs. Some are deficits that have not been corrected in terms of the treatment infrastructure and are required to bring about some upgrades relative to that. Some are failure to monitor failure to sample, some are failure to report. So they are essentially paper exercises, but they're all key for us to be able to be fairly transparent, to be able to demonstrate that the safety of the water continues to be delivered by any given system. Next slide. The other side of enforcement is, again, through, as Mr. Glade described, our district offices, and they do sanitary surveys of all the systems. For the community systems, the municipalities or rural water districts, that's once every 3 years. For the non-community systems, the schools, the convenience stores, the industries, that's once every 5 years there. And our inspectors are looking at 8 elements covering the breadth of delivery of that water, starting at the source, the distribution system, pumping and treatment, as well as then the paperwork, monitoring and reporting, how the management and operations are looking, and how that finished water is ultimately stored, and to ascertain and make sure that the operators of that system continue to be certified and are holding their certification up to date. Next slide. Disinfection is probably rule number 1 for every one of our public water supplies, and there are statutory and regulatory expectations in terms of the level of chlorine that has to remain within the system, not just at the point of treatment, but all the way to the end point of the distribution system there, with expectations of free chlorine levels that are laid out in law, or in total chlorine there, with a federal maximum that is used to basically safeguard the public, as well as try to minimize corrosion of the distribution system, holding the chlorine levels under a certain maximum. Next, please. Boil water advisories are probably our most public expression of how we're administering the act. They're almost a daily occurrence here. And typically 3 chief causes there. A system will see a loss of pressure, which invites the introduction of contaminated water into the system, or there's deficient chlorine residuals detected through the testing, or there's actual detections of positive total chloroform or E. coli in the samples that are delivered to the state lab. Any of those constitute a cause for putting in a boil water advisory that remains in place until subsequent sampling shows that the water has returned to be shown to be totally safe. Next slide. For surface water issues here in Kansas, probably one of our biggest issues is involving disinfection byproducts, the presence of organic matter within our raw water, and then undergoing the process of disinfection, interacting with chlorine or ozone, and creation of these byproducts that have been shown to be suspected of being carcinogenic. They come in 2 forms, typically trihalomethanes or haloacetic acids, and as you can see, we've had a number of issues with a number of our public water supplies exceeding the MCLs associated with that, whether it's 80 part per billion of trihalomethanes or 60 part per billion haloacetic acids there. And we work toward, again, improving the treatment techniques associated with that to try to minimize and reduce the development and creation of these disinfection byproducts. Next. Over on the groundwater side, as you again saw from Mr. Glave's presentation, with the advent of the drinking water protection program for groundwater, probably nitrates is our biggest issue there, sprinkled throughout the state, with exceedances of the MCL of 10 milligrams per liter shown there. And it's a long-term process to try to bring the system back down under that, whether it's through finding a new source, actual treatment, or some type of dilution, or now again with the drinking water protection program, going back to our source and doing source water protection to try to eliminate the sources that are introducing the nitrate into the groundwater system that's being tapped for water supply. Next. Most of the contaminants are under the Safe Drinking Water Act are viewed as long-term lifetime consumption issues. A maximum contaminant level is associated with that lifetime exposure there, but there are 3 incidents of where the contaminants are much more acute. Bacteria, and that triggers the boil water advisories. Nitrate, you can't always boil out all the contaminants. In fact, in the case of nitrate, boiling works against us in that it begins to concentrate the level of the nitrate. So in the case of nitrate, we issue a do not drink advisory. And then sometimes we encounter some arcane contaminant like benzene. And in that situation, especially something that's very volatile that way, we issue a do not use the water until the situation is corrected. Our emergency response is driven by things such as spills happening above a source of water, and then we continue to monitor the situation again in concert with the Bureau of Environmental Remediation, work on managing that spill and maintaining the appropriate advisories until the danger has passed. Line breaks and loss of pressure that occur, especially in weather like this, boil water advisories are common. As we saw in 2019, flooding was a big factor in disrupting our operations for our public water supplies. Introduction of contaminants by the water or loss of water supplies we saw above Perry Lake for a few public water suppliers there. Statutorily, all the public water supplies are all required to develop emergency plans. And by regulation, we extend that to those public water supplies to look at identifying their risks and mitigating those, developing alternative supplies and alternative means of delivery of the water, alternative arrangements for testing and laboratory analytics, determining what that minimum level of service has to be made just to keep the drinking aspect of public water supply intact there. And then other things, how you're going to deal with fire suppression during the situation when your system is offline. Next, please. Looming challenges, as I've referenced already, revised lead and copper rule has just been building up momentum in the aftermath of Flint. That's going to place more demands on our utilities, starting with over the next 3 years, inventory of the materials within their distribution systems, as well as replacing lead on both sides of the meter, not just on the utility side, but on the customer side when it's encountered there. It'll be a major undertaking to just begin to understand just how much extensive lead has been. Our conventional wisdom is lead hasn't been that big of a problem here in Kansas. Again, for groundwater supplies, it's been nitrates and surface water, it's disinfection byproducts, but it is in fact present, and the law doesn't care. It says go out and prove it and find it, and when you find it, replace it. PFAS is emerging as a concern. It is ubiquitous. It isn't just in the water, it's in everything. And EPA, we're waiting on EPA guidance as to how we're ultimately to deal with it. It has not yet been a critical factor in what we've sampled from our Kansas public water supplies. That'll change. The deeper we look, the more detailed we look, I'm sure we will find it, and then we'll have to comport to what the federal expectations are when we encounter PFAS. Loss of our certified water treatment operators, especially in the rural counties, continues to be a building crisis on the making that gets toward being able to have someone certified in charge of the operating system to maintain the relative delivery of good, clean water. The events this week in Florida highlight the need for having someone on station there to provide safeguards, especially in light of threats on cybersecurity, but being able to oversee it and overrun the automated delivery that might ultimately get hacked, and being able to take control and continue to deliver that safe drinking water. And then finally, small town compliance, as we see in a number of our small towns. When they're confronted with some of the health-based violations under the Act. The solutions tend to be fairly expensive, and it's an ongoing challenge for us to help bring those systems back on the right side of the law. Some of it's relatively easy in terms of monitoring, reporting, but some of it, when it deals with the actual health-based violations of MCLs, that is a long-term proposition to find the appropriate engineered solution. Our budget for the public water supplies is driven chiefly by federal grants. come down from EPA, and a lot of it is from fees that are derived off of our drinking water SRF to administer that, but also provide these ancillary support for administering the act. We have a permit fee fund, 0.2 cents per 1,000 gallons on retail sold water that comes in that we utilize. And then we also have some, again, essentially one-off federal grants that have come forth on federal priorities, such as testing for lead in schools and detection of PFAS in public water supplies. Next slide. Also embedded within the Safe Drinking Water Act is the Underground Injection Control Program. And Weed Council, our geology and well technology unit, delivers and administers that, as well as 2 state programs. I'll quickly run through the basis of those. Next slide. Again, one more. Statutorily, again, it's embedded within the Safe Drinking Water Act, this notion of protecting water supplies that might be subject to contamination by underground injection. And there's a variety of different classes of wells that potentially inject fluids down into underlying aquifers, et cetera, and they're safeguarded by a variety of conditions and expectations depending on what type of class of well that is. Again, it's federally oversight. We have primacy on that issue as well for class 1s, which inject hazardous material or contaminated material down below clean water sources of drinking water. Class 3s, which involve salt solution mining, and then class 5s, which are injection of material water down into the ground, but relatively not hazardous. That ranges anything from complex septic systems to the Wichita Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project is viewed as a class 5. Even the disposal well at Lakin is viewed right now under a class 5 situation. Next, please. We have, for class 1, we have 50 active wells currently, managed by about 23 different facility or companies that go forth. We have 4 facilities operating the salt solution mining of class 3, and then we have thousands of these class 5 type of injection wells that, again, inject non-hazardous fluids and just underground. Some of that also includes things like heat pumps, et cetera, and so forth. Next, please. A lot of the program is steeped upon testing and maintaining the integrity of the wells, monitoring, reporting back to KDHE, and then subsequently EPA, and then appropriate response when things go offline and we have to do a shut-in for a given well or respond to a spill, et cetera. Again, from the slide, you can see the extent of the program. The UIC programs have tended to be among the national leaders across the country in managing the injection of fluids into underground aquifers. Next, please. Again, I'll also mention that we have 2 state programs that also are embedded toward protection of water supply. The underground hydrocarbon storage, essentially taking advantage and managing the storage of hydrocarbon product in our salt caverns that are developed in Reno and Rice County predominantly. Liquid hydrocarbons, liquefied natural gas, crude oil are all covered by state regulations relative to that, and it's all embedded within the state statute that governs protection of groundwater as much as surface water by KDHE. The Water Well Program implements the Groundwater Exploration and Protection Act and goes toward the licensing of well drillers in the state, as well as collection of water well records to make sure that the integrity of the wells are such that they don't present a a threat to underlying water supplies. Next slide. Very quickly then, synopsis of our underground hydrocarbon storage programs. There are about 10 facilities across central Kansas with over 350 active wells and salt caverns, utilizing that storage capacity and that very tight relationship of the salt to hold any product within it. We have an exchange there as product is moved out to maintain the integrity of the caverns. Brine is placed in there, and then conversely, when product is being stored there, the brine comes out, and we have to appropriately safeguard the storage of that brine so it doesn't present a environmental threat to the surface and surrounding water supplies up on above ground. Next, please. Again, it is a mode of testing the system, testing the wells, reviewing plans for shutting in or maintenance of the wells and the relative, assessing the integrity of the caverns, and ongoing inspections relative to that, both in terms of the infrastructure utilizing the injection and storage capabilities, but also the storage of the brines. Next, please. And very quickly, as I touched on water wells, we license over 200 contractors annually, and we review close to 6,000 water well records of wells that have been drilled, and then look at the record, make sure that the information is all complete and ensures that the well was put in properly, and then we deliver those records to KGS for storage within their data archives. Next, please. Final slides. Our budget for the geology programs basically come again from a federal grant, but also fees associated with underground hydrocarbon storage, as well as salt solution mining. And with that, my last slide to conclude. I'm ready to hand off to Mr. Juergens to talk environmental remediation. Thank you.
Mr. Stiles, we'll hold questions until we get through with the final speaker. Mr. Juergens, are you ready?
Absolutely, Chair Hyland and members of the committee. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So I'm going to talk about contaminated site cleanup. And these are cleanups that are within the Bureau of Environmental Remediation, as well as our Bureau of Waste Management. Next slide, please. So in general, in Kansas, there's been nearly 7,000 contaminated sites that we have had to address through the various programs. About 3,150 of those are currently active, I mean, different levels of assessment, remediation, and monitoring. In addition to that, KDHE has a spills program where we're notified of chemical spills that occur. In state fiscal year 20, we had just under 700 of the chemical spills, which was down from a normal of around 900, mostly because of COVID, because there was far less transportation and many businesses, industry were shut down. But in general, you can see that fuels, process oils such as hydraulic fluids and oils and transformers are the bulk of them. The oil and gas industry had about a little over 111 or so, 111 spills. And then ag was pretty low. It had about 55 in the pesticide and fertilizers. Next slide. So I'm not going to go over much on the laws. As Leo Henning talked about yesterday, there's definitely a tight interaction between the federal and state laws, but we're a little bit short on time and want time for a Q&A. So that'll be there if you want to see it. We generally operate under circular record and then surface mining. Next slide. So our funding sources, I'm going to start right there first because this is for environmental remediation on my bureau. And we have a significant budget of almost $30 million. Much of that is with our underground storage tank fund. Approximately 19 million comes from that. That's used for leaking underground storage tank, orphan sites, our share of Superfund, match, et cetera. US EPA is giving us about 2.8 million. Office of Surface Mining, which is Department of Interior, about 2.9 million. Army Corps of Engineers, 600,000. That's for oversight of the federal facilities. And then Department of Ag gives us some funds for old grain storage facilities. Then our state general fund and state water plan combined is about 1.6 million. Of that, roughly 1 million from this fiscal year was from state water plan funds. And then the rest is from various fee funds and settlements. Next slide, please. So what are the different categories? A potentially responsible person is somebody that caused contamination. So it's basically the polluter pays idea. And our state cooperative and voluntary cleanup programs have a lot of folks in them that did cause the contamination. Our VCP program also has some that just bought property that was contaminated and they want to be able to clean it up. And so those two are basically the state version of Superfund, along with our dry cleaning program. Also PRP lead, our federal facility sites, which is our Army, Air Force, and Naval sites, formerly used defense sites, missile sites, et cetera. And then our Bureau of Waste Management has solid waste, which is the landfills. Often those are county, city, or some private-owned landfills that have contamination. And then the hazardous waste, which is going to be the storage, treatment, and disposal of hazardous waste and storage of and use of hazardous chemicals. Next slide, please. We have a pretty strong federal collaboration with EPA, with the Department of Interior on the surface mining side. The picture on the left is the Cherokee County Superfund site, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more later. And then on the right is our surface mining, who uses their funds for mine reclamation of the surface strip pits, as well as emergency actions and subsidences for the underground mining that occurred in both coal and lead and zinc mining. Next slide. So our state lead programs, these are programs where the state program is taking the lead and overseeing the cleanup, either using federal funds or state funds. Our leaking underground storage tank is a large one that we have. Just think of all the gas stations across the state. And then our surface mining folks, as I've mentioned, they're dealing with trying to help with the emergency actions, subsidences. The picture in the middle is a large shaft or boring that was done in preparation, looking for the different ores that they were seeking to mine. The picture on the left, that is representative of gasoline or some type of fuel that was on top of the groundwater. So that's a sample that was taken. You can see how much was there. Nearly a foot of fuel was on top of the groundwater. And then our orphan site and dry cleaner, those are state lead as well. Orphan site basically is everything that doesn't have a responsible party or a trust fund to work on it. Often we get those through bankruptcies, we get them through an owner may pass away, or we just can't figure out where the contamination is coming from. And then our dry cleaning program is one of the stronger ones in the United States. It's not the most well-funded because not a lot of people are doing dry cleaning right now, especially with COVID. But the picture on the right is a 1.5 mile long contaminant plume in Derby for some contamination we found there. Next slide, please. So the contaminant cleanup process, this is kind of showing how we go through that. And basically you start from the lower left. We get discovery and investigation. We may get a phone call. We may get a complaint that there's been a problem, and we go out through our complaint tracker system that Eric Glaive talked about and determine if there's truly some sort of release. The next step, we go to the assessment and we look at what is the impact of the contamination. So what's the three-dimensional location of the contamination, east, west, north, south, spatially, as well as vertically. How is it falling through the groundwater and through the aquifer, as well as looking at surface water impacts. And then from that, we look at the risk evaluation, what kind of risk is it going to have? And during a feasibility study, we determine what kind of cleanup could be done, what's the cost benefit analysis, what's the impact to human health and the environment. From there, it moves on to the cleanup plan and design. That's where the engineers get involved and figure out how are we going to clean this mess up, okay? Then the next step after that is doing the actual cleanup, which could take several months. It could take decades, depending on the type of contaminant. And after that, we get the remediation underway. Then there's usually some period of monitoring to make sure that the cleanup was effective, or there's site use controls that are used to protect the public from the contamination. Anytime during this steps, this process, the party can do an intermediate action. So they may see some gross contamination and go get that out of the way first until we look at the long-term water impacts. And then the public has got a lot of opportunities for participation through public meetings and public comment periods. Sometimes the low-level contamination, it doesn't really warrant a cleanup, but we got to keep an eye on it. And so that can move directly over to the monitoring. Next step. Next slide, there we go. Contaminant discovery. So we find that as we're doing different types of monitoring at existing sites, maybe a public water supply well is going to find something in their routine monitoring that Tom had talked about. During property transaction investigations, it's common for commercial properties to do sampling to check the property, and we often find out through those manners, as well as the complaints and through spills. And the picture in the middle, you see that's an oil spill. We had 4 of those in the Butler County area a few years ago, and somebody just went out and dumped them. We had to end up cleaning that up with some of our funds. Next slide. Once we get the discovery, then we look at the assessment. That's that 3-dimensional investigation to look where the contamination is going. We use existing monitoring wells or domestic wells. We may have to put new wells in. The picture in the middle is showing us using a geoprobe with, we have 3 rigs of our own as well as 20 contractors that we can utilize to figure out where the contamination is coming from. Once we do that, then we go back to whoever is responsible. And if nobody's responsible, we look at the state programs. Then we also look very closely at surface water. So what is in the sediment? What is in the streams or the ponds? Or is there an interaction between groundwater and surface water? Next slide. From there, we move on to the remediation. How do we clean it up? There's a variety of ways based on the type of contaminant, on the size of the contaminated area, what the cleanup levels are. And the cleanup levels, to give you an idea, Tom had talked about part per million or part per billion for the different, what we're testing for and what we want to clean up to. To give you an idea, part per billion is 1 drop of dye in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So we're talking some pretty small amounts here. So the chemistry is important. But on the remedial side, if we can dig it out, if we can remove the contamination, that's what we want to do. But it's expensive to do that. So the picture on the left is somebody removing a tank, and then they would try to dig out any contamination that may be present there as they're doing that project. And then on the right is a pump and treat system where we pump water through from some wells through the granular activated carbon in this case, and we always look for a beneficial use. So if we can take that water, put it back into a public water supply system or some other beneficial use, that is what we look for. Another method is in situ, which just means it's in the ground basically. Bioremediation is we're going to try to work with the existing bacteria or maybe introduce some bacteria, feed them basically, help them attack whatever the chemicals are that we're after, or have the bacteria help promote an anaerobic environment such that the bacteria that may go after a different type of contaminant, such as PCE, you want to get that environment such that it will then help degrade that as well. Thermal is basically injection of steam or use an electrical resistivity to boil what's underground in the water and to kind of boil it out and then remove it through vacuum extraction. Chemical oxidation is using a chemical such as sodium permanganate to interact directly in the groundwater with PCE or some solvents, for example, and try to convert those over to something that's not near as bad. And then cap in place means the contaminations in the soil. If we can just prevent the rainwater from percolating through, we can stop the migration, similar to a landfill. And then we also use those on-site controls, such as our environmental use control program, to prevent folks from digging in a contaminated area or not allow use of groundwater in certain areas as well. Next slide, please. So the remediation example on the left is the sodium permanganate was injected at a site in the Wichita area. The sodium permanganate is purple, which is why it has that color. So we know that it's there and it's working. We can track that color over time. The depiction on the right is soil vapor extraction and air sparging, and that's where we use the well going down into the groundwater, inject air to basically bubble up and strip the contaminants out of the groundwater. And then we have a vacuum placed on wells that are in the air of the soil above the groundwater, pull that out through a treatment and then into the atmosphere. Next slide. This is an example of the Cherokee County Superfund site. And the picture on the left, this facility stopped operating in probably 1970, maybe early 1980. This picture was from about 10 years ago. And you can see there's absolutely nothing growing there. And that's from the chat, from the tailings, from the lead and zinc mining. And so this is important to clean that up. The picture on the right is the exact same area. After EPA's contractors went in, took the contamination, buried it, basically created a repository, which is similar to a landfill. And we're able to use this property now, beneficial use, where the property owner can do some minor grazing of cattle there. So this has been a real successful project. The Cherokee County site covers half of Cherokee County. So it's a very large area, thousands of acres are being cleaned up down there. Next slide. So one of the things that we push for is pollution prevention. We do that through the permitting process, through our Bureau of Waste Management, as well as environmental remediation. And the goal is to evaluate the plan and kind of look at how they're using the different chemicals and getting rid of the waste. This ensures that those preventative measures are in place. You want to have secondary containment to catch any leaks of any chemicals that happen. You want the routine monitoring to make sure that we can tell when there's been a release and we can have them quickly address that. Spill prevention plans, just so they know quickly how to deal if they do have a spill. How are they going to clean it up and get rid of the waste? And then the periodic reporting makes sure that KDHE has eyes on this and that we're getting the proper reporting as far as chemical use. Next slide. The Bureau of Waste Management has about 400 permits out there for solid hazardous waste and hazardous chemical storage. The Bureau of Environmental Remediation has nearly 6,300 above ground storage tanks and nearly just over 2,400 facilities. On the underground storage tank side, just under 10,000 tanks, 3,500 facilities. And then we currently have about 61 dry cleaner facilities that store solvents that are used in the dry cleaning industry. The picture on the right shows underground storage tanks being put in place. And one of the things we've tried to do is have redevelopment programs that promote putting in the equipment that is going to be protective. And we currently have a system or a program that allows single wall tanks, which was the norm for many years, to be replaced with double wall tanks. That way, if the gasoline, the fuel, whatever's being stored in there does happen to corrode that first wall, the detection that's occurring and in between the two walls on the double wall tank will be able to know that and respond to that kind of a release before it gets to the soil. Next slide, please. One of the biggest projects I guess we worked on as a general is our Bureau of Water and Environmental Field Services and then Environmental Remediation was looking at the Upper Arkansas River Basin. It was a mineralization study. The Kansas Geologic Survey had found some elevated levels of uranium in some of the wells in Hamilton, Kearney, Finney, Gray, and Ford counties. And through the basin, we did an approach with the Kansas Water Office and then the local water and health departments to where we provided bottles for property owners with domestic wells to collect the sample, drop them off at the health department or the local water department. And then we had those shipped to our laboratory so we could analyze for uranium, iron, nitrate, sulfate, and a mixture of others. But those four were some of the primary contaminants that we found. And then give some guidance if somebody had elevated uranium in their well and how they could treat that. 258 samples were analyzed at the KDHE lab, mainly in 2019. And the Kansas Geologic Survey is doing a second phase of this study right now. And so with that, the local folks can try to come up with plans on how to prevent the uranium buildup. It's partially just because of the irrigation, the amount of water coming down the river basin, the fact that river gets dry there. And so it's just accumulating there instead of getting washed through. So that is an ongoing project. Next slide, please. I believe I am done. And so there's my contact information, and hopefully I left enough time for questions for all of us that have discussed our programs with you over the last 2 days.
Mr. Jurgens, I've enjoyed the full 2 days. So now what we'll do, those that want to ask questions, if you would ask your question and relate it to the individual you'd like to answer, it would be appreciated. And Representative Riley, you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this was Director Stiles, the one before. Just my question had to do with, I didn't hear much about monitoring the ethanol plants and their things that are going on in those plants. Did you have some information on that? Thank you.
Representative Riley, yes. If those plants, most of those plants with their waste streams are permitted and required to monitor and submit that data to us, whether they are a discharging facility or if they are not, non-discharging lagoon type system farther out west, or even potentially if they are a pre-treatment system, if they're an industry that then feeds into the city's sanitary sewer system. That setup typically requires them to provide data of the level of quality of the effluent that they're producing from their process. But they are just one of many industries that we cover in a similar fashion.
Thank you. Representative Orr.
Yes, thank you. This would be for Eric Glaive. Eric, you talked about the local environmental protection plan and you explained how that was funded, but I did not understand. Could you go through that again for me?
Yes, thank you, Representative Orr. So the local environmental protection program was funded in the mid-90s to 2012 by the state. And I think there was about $1.2 million funding per year that allowed us to subsidize counties to develop sanitary codes and to actually help them pay their sanitarians. After 2012, some of the counties got together, well, even beforehand, got together and had groups of counties that used one sanitarian. But as of late, we've seen, especially in Southwest Kansas, where you're at, we've seen some withdrawal from that program, mostly due to counties wanting to direct their own staff. But when we do that, we often see that somebody who's also the landfill supervisor and the airport supervisor and the noxious weed supervisor, who's also been put in charge of the sanitary code. So he may not have the experience that he had. Those are things we provide a lot of technical assistance with. We try to get them to interact with KeyHall, the Kansas Environmental Health Association, so that they can get the training they need. We provide training and we really help counties try and keep their sanitary codes updated. Is that what you needed, sir?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this question could be for Mr. Henning or Mr. Glade. Both yesterday and today, we talked about point and non-point source pollution. And between them, I was kind of curious which might be more difficult to identify and mitigate. And then I might have a follow-up to that as well.
Am I on?
You're on.
All right. This is Leo Henning. Thank you for the question. And that's a tough question. In my opinion, I would think that non-point source is the most difficult because we don't regulate it. We can only provide best management practices to try to reduce contamination reaching the streams. We do regulate the point sources, and we actually have a permit with those facilities. And if there is a violation occurring, we can correct those violations through the permitting process and enforcement process. For non-point source, it's difficult because it is voluntary. And if landowners do not want to participate, there's no requirement for them to do so. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I do have a quick follow-up to that, and that might be for Mr. Glade. You talked about the assessment and local solutions for non-point source pollution areas. And so I was curious how you identify, was that through the nitrate mapping, and then what some of those local solutions might look like?
Thank you for the question. Yes, especially on the drinking water protection program, our nitrate mapping really reflects the nitrate results from public water supply samples that are routinely collected and analyzed. As we move away from that, we have Water, Tom Stiles Group has a watershed quality monitoring system that we really look at the actual stream to do routine sampling at various points in the streams and routine and regular sampling. So we're able to really monitor the health of the stream throughout the process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part. You had mentioned too that sometimes local, whoever the polluters may come together and come to an agreement about ways to mitigate the pollution. I was kind of interested in some of what those solutions might look like.
Yeah, so we try not to call them polluters; they're stakeholders.
Sorry, stakeholders.
Yeah, we try and get together and so in the drinking water protection program, we really look at, hey, are we utilizing the right fertilizer? Are we using the right techniques to keep things above ground and moving? And we also have our 9-element plans that the stakeholders put together and guided by the person we have, especially on the RAPS programs, guided by our paid personnel who are paid through that fund, not my staff, who really go through and develop data and look at data and develop strategies to reduce that. So it might be something as easy as, hey, we're not going to plant this area next to the stream in this. We're going to, maybe not in corn, maybe we're going to plant that in rye, so that next year when the high water comes, the rye's there instead of a empty field, and the rye will actually hold back some of the sediment, which would carry phosphorus and potentially nitrates into the stream. The same thought process goes for the drinking water protection program, where we're trying to protect the groundwater. We really want to make sure that the nitrogen that is applied is getting utilized properly. Nitrogen is our primary source of contaminant there, and keep a growing crop cover on there to use up the nitrogen and also recycle the nitrogen. So if you get a crop of radishes, that crop of radishes can go down after you've had your corn crop. The crop of radishes will go ahead, utilize the nitrogen that's there. They'll store that. We don't harvest that. And then as they deteriorate over the long winter season, they actually break back down, and once again, we're able to keep that nitrate that they had up there. It'll also convert some of our nitrates that are chemically unavailable for plants. They'll help convert that over to be utilized again.
That's helpful. Thank you both, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I have a couple quick questions, one for Mr. Stiles. Last year, if I remember right, you had a bill in dealing with injection wells, and during our discussion, we determined that septic systems would fall into that category. Has that been worked out and resubmitted?
No, sir. We have chosen not to submit the bill for this coming session. We will likely try to submit something next year. And part of that is we need to pin down exactly the criteria that would be associated with our larger complex septic systems that would be the class 5s and not the individual septic system that I think was the concern of the committee and was never our intent to bill them or assign a fee to them. But we need to do some more homework to clarify that point and to put in the appropriate safeguards that the fee is directed toward those more complex systems that take up more of the staff time than the day-to-day household type of septic system, which would potentially fall under class 5, but is not in our view fee worthy.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much for that update. And Mr. Juergens, the dry cleaning fluid fund, is there any funds in there available now? When we had our problem in my district, there were no funds.
Correct. The fund itself right now from the dry cleaning fees is definitely greatly reduced, and it's currently allocated to projects. One thing that we did do is we're able to use some of our environmental stewardship funds, which is our orphan site funds, to work on facilities that no longer have businesses available that could help with this, should the dry cleaning trust fund go away, for example. And so we've been able to use some of those ESF funds, and I believe we currently have $1 or $2 million encumbered to projects. So we are moving forward with projects. The dry cleaning portion of it is definitely minimal right now. And the COVID has definitely hurt that. But luckily we had those ESF funds to help keep projects moving along.
Well, that's a problem that's not going to go away, so we need to think about funding that in the future. So the second question for you is, your reclamation projects, do they include the limestone quarries?
No, they do not. The limestone is its own. I believe that's, I'm not sure if that's at the federal level or if there's a state program, but it's not part of that Surface Mining Act.
That's Department of Agriculture. I just want to know if you were involved in it at all. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to go back to the septic systems issue, and I have a question. I know that the explanation and the presentation that we've received today has reflected on land use decisions here and there. And one of those is the use of alternative septic systems that theoretically are innovative enough to reduce the amount of land that one might have to have for development in a rural area where municipal services are not available. I just wondered if that was still a factor in deciding density around urban developments.
I believe that's for me, gentlemen. Thank you, Representative Bishop. Yes, there are some considerations on alternative septic systems still, and we do use those for, depending on the soil type and really the location that we're in to, yes, reduce the amount of land instead of having a 2-acre or 3-acre requirement, being able to say, well, maybe 1 acre for your septic system is available. But each of the counties actually really develops those codes. We review those codes and they can develop that, that process. We do give them a standard, what we call Bulletin 4-2, which gives a standard set of recommendations, and we try and, help them come to that agreement. But the counties themselves have authority and responsibility to set those up. So is that sufficient?
Thank you. Thank you. That is a good answer. I didn't realize how fast it was going forward in terms of reducing the amount of land to where you can actually have suburban developments in fairly rural areas, which may be a good thing, depending on the availability of good water and the ability to not contaminate groundwater and so forth. So that was very helpful. What frequently happens or has been is that because of a development looks to be pushing the envelope, municipal services are then gathered up and provided for that area, and it pushes the boundaries of urban areas out more rapidly perhaps than their 30-year plan or whatever would call for. So I find that to be a bit of a concern in terms of urban development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very much appreciated. Your time and the presentations, well done. The committee, you've worked hard this week. I appreciate it. We will not have committee meeting tomorrow. Have a good weekend. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.